You are listening to the SDSU Football Podcast, presented by the East Village Times, with your hosts Andrew Aumavae and Paul Garrison. Welcome, listeners, to a special Father's Day episode of the SDSU Football Podcast. I am Andrew Aumavae, and I'm joined, as always, by Paul Garrison. If you recall, in May, we did a special Mother's Day episode where we included interviews with mothers of two Aztec football players and some comments from players about their moms. This episode is also a special one as we have an interview with Andrew Aumavae, who is the father of Aztec quarterback Liu Aumavae. Great interview with him that talked about not just Liu and his recruitment and the family process about Liu's recruitment, but about the Polynesian culture and lifestyle and how football fits into that. So some great insight there from Drew. First up, before we get into the interview with Andrew Aumavae, we had Patrick McMorris, safety for the Aztecs, on an episode a few weeks ago. And after our interview with him, we asked him to say a few words about his father. So we're going to play you that clip first, McMorris talking about his dad, and then we will get into the interview with Andrew Aumavae. I hope you enjoy it.
All right, so talking with Patrick McMorris, Father's Day episode. Patrick, can you tell us about your father, sharing the same name, and just what he has meant to you in your football journey?
My father, like I said, share the same name, so I'm a junior. But yeah, definitely throughout my football journey, I mean, he's the one who I've always looked up to. Just being able to look up to him, talk to him about football, because he played the sport when he was younger, and he was a running back as well. So that's why I played a little running back. But being able to be coached by him and learn things, and like I said, just talk to him about things and he'll understand it. It's definitely big. And what he means to me, man, just the world, really. I every time I put on the jersey, Morris is on the back. So I'm just trying to represent him and everybody throughout my family. But yeah, definitely love to see him smile when I make a play or something. So man, I love that guy.
We want to welcome Andrew Aumavae to the SDSU Football Podcast. How are you doing today?
Good. I'm doing well.
One of the focuses of this interview is for you to be our guide to understanding the football culture in Samoa and among Pacific Islanders in general. Starting off, what should everyone know about football in Samoa?
First of all, thanks for having me on. I want to openly acknowledge, though, that I'm not the only one Samoan coach alive, and that I'm not speaking on behalf of everybody. Everything's based on my personal and professional experiences. So in no way, my experiences represent everyone's experiences. Just in general, besides what everybody else knows about football and Samoa is, I want to point out why Polynesians play sports. Right. Because usually everyone talks about the love of the game or love of the sport. In our culture, it's a little bit different. Why do Polynesians play sports? I think because of mobility. It allows us to move geographically from one location to another location for opportunities. Right. So that would be two, gives us pathway to opportunities, education, jobs, and access to resources. And then the third one is basically service, which is our tautua to our people, to our family. Majority of the guys will be first generational college graduates, right? And then from that provides financial support for the family, whoever's back home on the islands. And then on top of that, it's just fulfilling that obligation to the family and community.
Now, the history of Samoa is fascinating, right? America Samoa started officially in 1900. There are different waves of migration, especially in the second half of the 20th century. What would you be willing to share about your family's chapter as part of that history?
Yeah, so that migration, that huge wave, in 1950s, For our family, it was basically based off of, it wouldn't have been my grandfather. So my grandfather had 4 sisters, and they basically married, 3 of the sisters married military men. So it was through their service to the military that allowed this pathway for us to migrate to Hawaii and to the West Coast. So that's what allowed like my dad's generation and my grandparents. So it's basically my grandfather's sisters, 2 of them, who married military men, and then they had to go to the United States to serve their term stateside, which allowed the pathway for us to move. So I was born in the state of Washington, and that's basically where that was the hub for our family, because my grandfather's sister, she married an Army active service member, and so they resided up there in Fort Lewis. My dad moved up there, and I was born up there in Tacoma, Washington. So that was our migration to, and not everybody's story is the same, but ours was based off of the military.
So living in San Diego, I grew up with many friends who were, the first or second generation to migrate to an area. And there was always a tension between some of the older generations and like the values that they grew up with, and then the younger generations and what they were facing in San Diego. Is that tension as prevalent among Polynesians, Samoans as it is there?
Yes. So let's be clear about the tension force that you mentioned. That tension force, the tension is mainly like for most marginalized communities. When migrating to the States, it's directly connected to colonization and the idea that in order to fit into the American way, you have to shed like pieces of your whole, right? Your authentic self. So we're talking about our Samoan language, our cultural traditions, our dances, our practicing tattooing, right? And then ways of knowing and being. So that tension force is alive and it's real. And it's not just for Samoans, but for most marginalized communities or populations. So no one tells you, the funny thing is, no one tells you that you can be both, right? And that your cultural assets are valuable in helping making that transition.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but fa'a Samoa is a phrase that describes the Samoan, the importance of the dignity of like achievement of the group. And you mentioned of the family earlier, as opposed to focusing just on the individual achievements. Has football and athletics in general been a place to pass down that part of the heritage to the next generations?
Yeah, so fa'a Samoa like really translate into, so if you translate into the English language, it's the Samoan way, right? Mm-hmm. So there's no doubt that there are many Samoan customs and traditions and ways of life that align with the same values and practices found in athletics. So for example, culturally, we work in community with others, just like you stated there in your definition of it. And then we pursue a goal with not just ourselves in mind, right? So we work for the greater good of the community, and that value transfers well into like group or team sports.
So we had your son, Leo, on our first episode of the podcast a few months ago. So shout out to Leo for helping us get this off the ground. But he told us he was named after you, right? So Andrew, your name is the Christian version, and he got the Samoan version, which let me see if I get this right. Leo Motu Ahane Liafi. Did I get that right?
You killed it.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. So why was it important for you to give Leo the Samoan version of your name?
Okay, so Leo and I are named after my great grandfather. So his name, it's not a direct Leo Motu Ana Liafi. It's not a direct translation to Andrew, right? So when the missionaries came over to our islands, obviously the name itself wasn't Christian. There was this big old like push to like we've got to save these savages and change the language, teach them the Bible. And other things. So the name they gave him was Andrew, right? So, but in our family, like in the Samoan culture or community, I'm sure a lot of you guys know a lot of Samoans with the name Junior, and Junior was not going to happen, right? So I had to find another way because I'd say junior and I'd have about 7 nephews turn around besides my son, right? So I was like, okay, so we're going to name you after my great-grandfather, who I'm named after. And then I thought it was kind of a cool thing because I figured later on down the road, we're going to talk like there's going to be some type of influence or something that's going to have to do with sports, right? And obviously in sports, like obviously we just talk about the daily struggle of like dealing with this stereotype of what a Samoan football player is, right? So, and then one of them is big, physical, and macho, right? So Liu's name is not a cool name. Like it literally is a cautionary tale of like, be careful, be humble, be aware of your surroundings. So basically he's named after our district. So we had a district and we wanted to start a war. So we literally went to war. We lost the war, right? So everything in our district was burnt to nothing. It was to a crisp. So all that was left was ashes and charcoal. So Liu's name he's named after that monumental war, right? That battle we lost. So it's basically a cautionary tale, like just be careful about make sure you can chew what you bite, right? Have some humility, even in victory. So, because there's always a bigger, badder dog out there.
That's definitely an amazing backstory to that, for sure. Thank you for explaining that. So legendary coach Famika Ane, who for our listeners was one of the pioneers in developing football first with Samoans in Hawaii, and then in American Samoa through clinics and camps. He once said, Samoans are very physical people. They simply can't stand losing, either in sports or in life. Does that still hold true as a defining characteristic?
Okay, I want to be clear when we speak about our people as being physical. Like I said before, we work great in community with other people. We never pursue a goal with just ourselves in mind. We work greater for the greater good of the community. And these values transfer obviously into team sports, right? So, however, there is nothing specific that says we as people are like more innately built for football than people from other races or ethnic groups. Okay, the danger of pushing that narrative is that our assets tend to be tied to our physicality, meaning our physical ability to perform. And that hyper focus on our brute physical strength overshadows our intellectual abilities, and it just perpetuates that racial stereotype. So are we competitive people? Sure. Like we are, just like everybody else. Are we driven, focused on goals? Absolutely. But are we physically designed differently than other people? No. There's the stereotype that a lot of us are big, bad guys, but I challenge you to come to American Samoa, Western Samoa, and you'll be very surprised that there are a lot of normally sized human beings on our islands.
So would you be our tour guide if we, Paul and I made a trip to American Samoa?
Bad.
Us around?
Just let me know. Just let me know.
So, I mean, using this platform a little bit to debunk some of those things, man. Tell us a little bit more about like the intellectual heritage and the things that you're referring to.
Yeah. So basically, like daily being a quarterback trainer, it's like, hey, you're not big. Aren't you supposed to be 300 pounds? I'm like, well, I probably look 300 pounds now, but my playing days, I wasn't, right? So it was like, hey, it was always the comment like, hey, you're a small Samoan. Are you really Samoan? Right? Like, or even you'd look at my brothers and be like, well, you must be adopted. Like you're from another race, right? So, and it ain't even funny. Like the funny thing is majority of us are my size. It just looks like, right? Like, so the stereotype is that we're all big and and the only thing we can do is like, we're big, we got nimble feet, we're fierce competitors, we're super loyal, like all the good things, right? And then mixed in with a few of those stereotypes. And then it just perpetuates like we're just these big bad bruisers, when now we've got this big old influx of like quarterbacks who are doing good things, right? We finally got a Heisman Trophy winner. We got a national champion quarterback, right? And so we're kind of slowly breaking the stereotype, but it's not just for everybody else outside. In our community, it's the same thing. Everyone just looks like, okay, my nephew's he's looking like he's going to be a 300-pounder. Okay, so his easiest path to success is let's put his hand in the dirt. Well, who says like when he turns 13 from 7 years old that he doesn't grow taller and thins out? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So usually and it's not just a Polynesian thing. It's just youth football in general. If you walk out there and you're the biggest guy, then guess what happens? You just happen to play on the line of scrimmage because you're too heavy to carry the ball, play quarterback, run with the ball, right? Like it's the guy who has the scarlet X on their helmet or on the chest where they can't carry the ball. So it's just not like our community, but it's like in football in general. But for us, that seems to be the stereotype, right? So
now I'm not 100% sure how to like phrase this idea. But one other characteristics of immigrant groups is that when they come to whatever area that they're going to, just I guess it's the numbers thing or whatever it is, but they seem to group together with other like-minded cultures, right? So you've been mentioning Polynesian quite a few times. And I'm really curious about like how, I guess like it kind of forms their own culture. Distinct from like wherever they actually originated from. So tell me about like the Polynesian culture when it comes to football and it comes to that grouping. I mean, is it fair that everyone's grouped together like that and just that dynamic?
Yeah, I don't think it's fair. Like, so, I mean, and part of that is like, so I just innately said Polynesian, right? So in the Pacific Ocean, we've got Micronesians, we got Melanesians, right? Like we have Indonesians. And all I did was identify my little triangle of like the islands I know, right? Like Fiji, Tonga, and then Samoa, and then you can add in Hawaii. But I mean, while there are like many similarities drawn between like all the various subgroups within Oceania, which is encompassing all of the Pacific islands, we're very different, right? And then we have different needs. Okay. So that's the danger in this AAPI category, right? Like this American, Asian, Pacific Island category that we're like lumped in and we're celebrating it because this is that month of May.
Yeah, right.
So we tend to get lumped in together, which masks like each of our individual or unique differences.
Yeah, and I think that's the difficult part, which is why I think when Andre opened this interview up, I mean, you being our guide is how we meant it, because I think some of these distinctions and these stereotypes, they're very difficult without careful attention and listening to be able to pull some of the differences. So transitioning a little bit into, San Diego State and the culture that's there, a lot of the good aspects of the culture that you're talking about, the non-stereotypical one is just, that hard work, toughness, personal integrity, a passion for the game of football. These are the foundational values of SDSU's culture. Is it true that there is such a match between what you're describing and what Coach Hoke and Coach Hall, et cetera, are building at San Diego State?
Oh, yeah, most definitely. So when we spoke earlier about Samoa, the Samoan way, many of our kids are pursuing athletic opportunities for like several reasons, right? Like, so as earlier I talked about the tautua, which is us like serving our families and our communities, which brings like personal pride to ourselves and then to those who we represent. Also to experience the upward mobility of playing maybe professionally in the NFL or earning a degree to begin a professional career. And then third is like to earn an education. So if a program could like neatly tie all those things together and root these experiences in like community, they'd most likely be able to appeal to more Pacific Islanders, right? So it's really about the support networks for young people. So if they decided to leave home, they're typically looking for other Pacific Islanders or in community. So it'd be coaches, teachers, or classmates, right? And then that would make them, that way they can link that up for whatever support they need. And and I will speak as a Samoan father. That's why we chose, as a family, San Diego State.
Yeah, San Diego State, their new defensive line coach, Justin Enna, he's a Samoan descent from Utah. Savaya Asulu, which is a tight end coach, is from Hawaii. Does having natives from the culture help build trust with the families and the communities through that recruiting process and once you're onboarded on the team?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So as a family, we sat down and we had 3 non-negotiables. And one of them was fit. So when we talk about fit, like we're talking about social fit, educational fit, demographic. So do we see our kind? Is that important to us? That was super important to us, right? Mm-hmm. So having Savai on there was huge because I know Savai. So, and then one of the non-negotiables was, are you going to love my son as much as I do? Because I'm literally handing him over, right? Like, are you guys going to take care of him? Are you going to treat him just like your son? So that was super easy. Those 2 non-negotiables got checked off super quick. All right. So having those guys on there gave me a sense of familiarity. I knew somebody who's going to be there, who will take care of the kid, not meaning like he's going to have to go like walk him to class and stuff, but just that comfort in knowing that there's somebody there who speaks like me, talks like me, right? And has the same experiences as me and the same values, right? So all we were looking for is community, people who shared the same values and thought processes. And that was huge for us. And then with Coach Hoke, like a lot of my friends played for him at Oregon State.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so that was super easy. So in the 90s, like mid 90s, I was calling up guys like, hey, you play for Hope. Tell me about him. He's like a dad to me. Every single one of them. So that was super easy. I was like, hey, that's an easy pass. When you've got guys that I consider my brothers and they're telling me like, yeah, I still think of him as my dad. I still talk to him. Mm-hmm. So that was super easy. Yes. It meant a lot to us that we had our kind as the staff and people who will be in community with my son.
Yeah, it definitely looks like you and the family took a very serious and structured approach to that decision without, making a hasty decision, obviously, right? So you guys, did it the right way for sure. You talked earlier about the stereotypes, right? That, you're famous for being a lineman. Maybe you're kind of that black sheep that trended towards quarterbacks, right? Your quarterback coach, you raised the quarterback's son. How did you develop in the world? How did you get into the world of quarterback development?
So it's funny because I myself was a product of the stereotype. So I played quarterback in the 90s, mid 90s in college, and there just weren't any guys 6 foot or under. Doug Flutie was the only one, and he was like an anomaly, right? So he wasn't the norm. So anyone who ran and was under 6 foot was not the guy. It was Drew Bledsoe. It was all these 6'5" guys, right? So I'm from the Northwest. And so every coach that recruited me was like, hey, you're going to play DB because you're fast. I was like, okay. And I know deep inside they're like, yeah, you're going to gain 50 more pounds and you're going to be a Mike linebacker super fast. I knew that that's what was going through their head, right? So literally my track to just playing the position that I loved, it was through a D3 school, NAIA school, that allowed me to play quarterback, right? And then even getting there, it was still like, hey, you're Samoan. You're probably a great tackler, right? And I'm just like, yeah, sure, like, right, by any means. And then when it got serious, I basically looked at the league. Okay, if I wanted to go to the league, it wasn't going to be as a quarterback. So kind of my charge into getting into training quarterbacks was like, okay, let me find all these guys who don't fit the mold or don't check the box. Okay. And then let's pour into them and then make these guys the guys where it's like, okay, I don't have the measurables, but everything else you're talking about, intangibles, like understanding the game, getting on the board, being able to articulate, being able to lead, like controlling my emotions, controlling the controllables. Those are the things that were going to like separate guys. So that big old crusade was like that. And then basically training my son was not like, the plan was not, you're going to play quarterback. I'm going to train you what I know. So I trained him as a quarterback. So just in case he does grow up to be a 300-pounder, then he can play with his hand in the dirt. But he would have the mentality and understanding of the game as a quarterback. That was the whole intention there. But it just happened. 300 pounds stayed off of him, right? And then he grew taller than 6 foot. So it was like, okay, you've got a pathway here. You've got, right? Like you've got these tangibles that these guys, the physical, right, check boxes that these guys look at. But and just doing that, it was like it was super easy, right? Like, so it was like he's my son, and he's just gonna listen, and that I couldn't ask for the best like student, right? So, and then from there, I just applied those principles that I have with Leo with all the guys that I have, and I've been blessed that there have been a couple people caught their attention with like the work I was doing, which allowed me like opportunities to get on the Elite 11 staff. And then I through that, it's like more doors have opened. I'm on the 6 TB12 staff, quarterback staff. I've had the opportunity to also go work like the business side, the operations side of football by running the Hula Bowl for the last 3 years. So it's just been the opportunity, it's just being open to doing different things, which is exactly what we're teaching the quarterbacks that I have the opportunity to train, and just be problem solvers and just be open and be a sponge and learn stuff.
So speaking of Samoan QBs, man, last year SDSU was the first program ever to offer somebody from the island itself.
Yeah.
And they offered Oki Salavaya, and Oki originally committed to SDSU before changing his mind, enrolling where his dad was a star at the University of Colorado. And speaking with the SDSU staff, they always knew that Colorado was going to be very, very difficult to beat given the roots there. You told us this at the spring game, but I think it's a really interesting thing. Could you just let us know like the connection that you have with Oki and Liu has with Oki, and probably that at the final analysis, him winding up at Colorado was the best thing, especially for your family.
Yeah. Well, so Liu and Oki are cousins. Oki's dad, Oak Sr., is my cousin. He's one of my dear and closest cousins. So through that entire recruiting process, we're talking about you guys brought up earlier, we're always trying to fight this stereotype because he's a super athlete. So it was literally within our family. And this is super funny. Like, so I've got several cousins who are position coaches in the Pac-12. They're all defensive guys. No one dared offer him because older Oak was going to kick somebody in the tail. So it was literally, so I was getting calls like, hey, Drew, so can you call so-and-so and see if they can offer as a defense, like as an athlete, and that allow all of us to just offer him as an athlete. So it was like, okay, do we cross the line of like maintaining our family ties or whatnot? But I mean, through the whole process of when Oki was going through his recruitment with San Diego State, I was super excited that they were the first ones to come out and give him opportunity to be a quarterback, right? Like that was super important to me because he came off the rock. So I was like, that's dope. And then when San Diego State came our way, and I was like, yeah, this is going to be kind of weird, right? Like, but it was going to be super fun if both boys were there. Like for us, like that would have been dream come true for me personally as his uncle, also as a Samoan quarterback trainer. Like that would have been super dope, 2 Samoans at the same school. But we kind of all knew that like Boulder was calling, right? So so that was going to happen. So, I mean, it worked out for everybody. Oki's doing good things over there. Matter of fact, he's back on the island right now. And I think he flies back at the end of June to report back to Colorado.
No, I mean, I think Andre and I really wanted to write that story of two cousins, competing for a starting spot. But both great kids, and obviously wish them the best for sure. Tell us more about your work with the QB circle. I love that term that you use, keeping your circle and working through that, and how I guess you've kind of coalesced these values that you're talking about around that phrase.
Yeah. So basically, I'm going to pour into, so when we talk about our circle through QB influence, we're basically talking about, I'm going to pour in all the values that I've been taught into your kids. So if you're an aspiring quarterback and you want, and I take a different approach because I'm not the guy who's going to train like hundreds and hundreds of kids. So I'm going to literally interview the parents, right? So are you really about this? So this is not about getting the scholarship, this training. So this training really is about life. So when I talk about beyond the X's and O's, I'm really talking about X beyond. And I get some weird looks when they're like, wait, what are we doing? I'm like, the football part is easy. That part you're going to see. That's the tangible part. But the part we're talking about, the circle, is being in community, right? We're human beings, and the way we function is we find commonalities between people. We find people who share the same beliefs, right? This is how we exist. Because other than that, then you're just a loner, and you're just trying to do it by yourself, and it's super hard. But when you're in the community, it makes dealing with all the stuff. Not only is it a hard position, it's the hardest position to play, right? And so not only is it hard on the field, it's hard off the field. I told everybody, once you start training and you raise your hand and say, hey, I want to play quarterback, I immediately say, God bless you, but it's going to be harder than what you think, because you're going to lose friends. And I said right off the bat, you're going to lose friends and you're going to lose relatives. And I I have this newfound appreciation for quarterback parents. And I think there's so much craziness that goes on that I can't believe that it really goes on. So I've never experienced that because I've always been on the sideline. So I've always been numb to the noise, right? So I teach the guys, block out the noise, negative and good or bad, right? The worst ones are the good ones when you hear the people cheering. Because then when you feel the people patting you on your back, that's when you lose your edge. That's when you think I made it. Then you start thinking other things instead of just being in the moment, training. So this whole circle thing, we talk about the circle, understanding that the people who do really have your back are the people who are going to be there through thick and thin, not the people who are hey, come here. They're going to be the ones when you say, this is my dream, this is what I want to do. I can't go to the theater with you, but hey, how about you come hang out at the field with me while I'm training? So my guys, literally their circle. So if their guys are about them, which is what it is, right? They'll be hanging out at our training sessions. So I have guys on the sideline, and because they're fans, it's because it's their friends, right? And so they're true friends. So they're okay, the only time I guess I'm going to get to hang out with you is at your training session. So we make it pretty light. We make it a joke. We're hey, here comes paparazzi, right? But we're literally just making fun of our friends who are coming, because they're you're just as crazy as your friend who wants to be quarterback, right? That you're supporting this guy's dream, and it's very unconventional. You're not hanging out. You're not at the pool. You're not over here at open gym. So it's just a mindset of just understanding, I'm not going to worry about what's down the road. I'm just going to take care of here and now. And then what happens at the end, cool. If I get it, I get it. But at the end of it, I've learned a whole lot of skill sets, different skill sets. I'll be able to be a problem solver. I can answer questions when they're asked. I can deal with tough situations, right? So I think a lot, the millennials get beat up a lot, but I just think there's some of it is true, is they lose a little edge, right? Everyone gets a trophy, right? So you got to deal with losing. You've got to deal with negativity. So if you learn this skill set now, it'll just allow you to it'll allow you to do anything you want outside of football.
Yeah, I've always looked at quarterbacks as a different breed, because the amount of information that you need to process, with the playbook, pre-snap, post-snap is ridiculous. So definitely have to give props to any quarterback that's out there doing what they do. Speaking of quarterbacks, your son, Liu, he graduated high school early and enrolled for the spring camp and went through spring camp. So as a father, what was it like to watch him go through spring camp?
To me, it was more of like, it was super fun, right? So him going to college literally like allows me to put on the dad hat, right? The fan hat. So doing this, it's super cool, wondering like, okay, how did he do today, right? So I'm trying to differentiate between the coach, right, the trainer, and then, so I'm just applying the principles that I'm teaching my guys, right? Like trust the process, right? Like block out the noise and all that kind of stuff. So for me, it's been super fun. So I'm dealing with a new hat that I'm wearing as a dad, and I love it. I'm telling you, I at first it was crazy thinking, okay, I'm not gonna be his play caller his senior year, and people are like, you're crazy, you're gambling with his career. I'm like, no, I'm gonna try something different. I'm gonna support this kid, and even now it's super easier now. So I love wearing the dad hat. Like this is a hat that I wear with a smile on my face, and I'll pound my chest as a dad.
You live in Utah still, right? Are you going to be planning on coming to all the games this fall?
Oh yeah, you'll see me.
Right. Nice.
I think the only game. So I mean, I've got a few nephews who have senior night. So one of my nephews, my first cousin, who I'm super close with, his son plays for Oregon. I may miss the New Mexico game because that's his senior game. So I may be going to Eugene, but that'll be the only one I know. Unless somebody else is like, hey, your nephew has another senior night. I'm like, okay, dude, I'm going to have to skip another game.
So Leo ended spring camp in like a 3-way tie for backup quarterback with Will Haskell and Kyle Crum. So looking ahead through the summer, is there anything specific you're working on with him that when he comes in back to fall, he's going to have his best foot forward?
No, just the process is a process, right? Like, so there's really no magic dust. Like, so him coming back here and putting on my trainer's hat is just basically back to the fundamentals, right? Like just drilling those down. Cause that's the part, like as a quarterback, cause it is a perishable skill set. And anyone who says it isn't, I could prove you wrong, like over and over. Like guys can lose their mojo. It's just like any sport, whether you're a batter, you're a pitcher, you lose this skill set. So you do need to fine tune some things. And then just reminders of like tying your feet to your eyes, just progression stuff, just stuff that's not taught very often, and things that we consider super valuable and important to your progression as a quarterback. But there is like nothing specific. It's just back to the fundies, right? Because as long as your fundies are set and your foundation's set, you're just worried about X's and O's after that. It's all reactionary.
So then, has there been any changes maybe to his game? Have you been able to see any of Jeff Hecklinski's stamp, anything on that development?
Well, I'm going to tell you this much. Coach Hall, huge, right? So I just full disclosure, and I told everybody this, as a quarterback trainer or dads, we tend to want to dabble in stuff that we don't truly understand. So when it came to like lifting weights, I wasn't going to make him do what they made me do in the 90s, which was bench every day, squat every day, and power clean every day. Right. Nowadays, people probably go to jail for doing that, right? Like, so it wasn't like I was going to do like what I thought was right. And I wasn't going to go YouTube. I wasn't going to go read a book. I would send them to get the minimal strength conditioning, minimal any type of running, like all that explosiveness. You go to college, they will figure that out. There are some professionals there who will do that. So I was totally hands off. I said, hey, you're going to get a guy like mentally, football wise, will have all that. You mold him how you want. And they're like, oh, he's pretty light. I'm like, his genes will kick in, trust me. and they are. Like, he's gaining weight like crazy now. So his big thing is, and the fun thing is, he walked in and everyone's like, majority of the people go in almost a finished product. There's so much more to pour into that cup. Like, it's not even close. So the weight has been a big one. So he's up 15 pounds. Yeah. And then he just talks about the daily grind, Coach Hall getting on his tail, the coaches. I was like, hey, but it's nothing new, right? When you're a coach's son, you get coached the hardest, fair or unfair. It's the life you live as a coach's son. A lot of that is you lose. And I will say this, you lose kind of your childhood because of, do I get to go hang out? Like, and so just because we were in this like business mentality from a young age, fun fact is he went to his first prom, right? Like, people talk about this big old deal, like, oh, this is what I'm going to wear. I'm going to go get this car and I'm going to go take these pictures. It's always been prom or some kind of formal dance has been on a training date, whether it was, I know last year he didn't go because it was, we went to Elite 11 Regional. He participated in Indiana. Years before that, any formal dance, it was like a training session with out of state or whatever it was, right? So it was always, yeah, I mean, yes, maybe he lost a little childhood opportunities of like experiencing some things, yeah. But in the grand scheme of things, the end result will be he'll be able to live out whatever his dreams are, right? And so I guess that was a cost to that. So, I mean, sorry to get off that.
No. This is no, you're our guide. So you're saying that he went to his first.
Yeah, it was super dope. It was
like recently.
Yeah. So he flew in and went directly to prom. And then
directly? How what's directly?
So he landed that same day. He had prom that evening. And here's the funny thing. He's such a rookie, and he's going to kill me for this, but that's all right. I love you, son. He got an outfit without asking the girl what color dress she's wearing.
Oh.
And I said, son, did you ask? And he was like, oh. I was like, you already bought your outfit? He goes, yeah. And I was like, ooh, you better cross your fingers. He goes, I'm taking an educated guess. And so he's lucky. He wore red, obviously. He's wearing red and black, Aztec colors. He said he didn't care if her dress was pink, blue. He was going Aztec colors. And good thing she wore black. So that worked out.
No doubt. Last question from me. You know, obviously, as a QB coach, you decided to, as you say, drop off your son and give him to another QB coach, Jeff Kalinski. We mentioned him in the last question. During the spring, you said that you got to sit in on his QB room and see what was going on there. From, I guess, both hats, as a QB coach, as a dad, what has your experience been like with Jeff Kalinski and you know, just how he runs his program as a coach?
Oh yeah, just like right from the start of his recruitment of Liu, he's been super like open about everything, about his methodologies, right, of what he believes in, what his offense was. Like, so earlier I talked about 2 non-negotiables that we had. Like, are you going to love my son and take care of him as if he's yours? Second was a fit, right? Like, so we're talking about socially, demographically, educationally, and then into the system. And then the third was our non-negotiable, which was like, how are you going to develop my son for the next level, right? So what does that look like, right? And so we asked some tough questions. We weren't just the normal family who's coming into and like, ooh, we love the locker rooms. Oh, love those helmets and those uniforms. Yeah. To me, your logo didn't matter. Your last name didn't matter to me. We had non-negotiables, right? So we weren't going to come off of that. So if you, just to go back to what we were talking earlier, if you didn't have a Polynesian on staff, like literally your school was not going to be, we just said, thank you. And just honestly, like for real, like it didn't matter. You could have been Nick Saban. Last year, didn't have a poly on his staff. Didn't matter. Thank you.
Wow. And for everybody listening, Leo was a national recruit. I mean, he got offers from everywhere. And so I mean, when he says
we did it different, right? Like the first time he got his first offer, his spring of his sophomore year was BYU, right? So A-Rod called, offered him. That was like super happy. And so I'm going through this process also as a dad with the whole recruitment thing. And then I'm trying also at the same time deal with it as a quarterback trainer. So I'm kind of learning what to do, what not to do, and try to stay within the values that I'm teaching my quarterbacks, right? Like don't be the guy who's overly boastful and stuff like that. So after he got his second offer from Charlie Fry at Central Michigan, I said, okay, son, you're only going to go to one school and we're going to change this up, right? So why do we need to tell the world what we're going to do? Why do you feel you need to share that? Right? Because it could get to a point where I started seeing guys like, oh, thank you, blessed for my 31st offer. Okay, so it gets to a point where, okay, thank you, I have the opportunity, to the point where it's like me. And then you're on a team, like majority of those guys play on teams where guys don't even have any offers. So how does that look? Like the team dynamic. And you're supposed to be the guy. You're supposed to be the guy who shows up early, leaves late, sets the example, right? First in line. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Sit in the front, never talk. Be the guy who leads from the front, right? So after the first couple offers, I was like, okay, I get it. Like people do this because we all know they're copycat offers, right? They're just guys who just follow other guys. And like, I used to work under his tree. I know how he evaluates. So if he offers him, then I'm just going to offer just because I know, just so I have an opportunity. And so a lot of good things came out of this is like, we learned, okay, I don't want the copycat offers. And then he was like, why not? I was like, well, are they really recruiting you? Or is it because they're going off of what somebody they're associated with and what their check boxes were? And I'm just going to ride that without really getting to know you. So that just got rid of a lot of craziness. And then being on the circuit, like Elite 11, I see the circus these guys go through. Like it's incredible. It's kind of fun in a way, but it's totally unfair because the expectation, the only place to go from there is down. And people celebrate it when those guys are falling down, right? Like they're like, oh, you're the 5-star and you haven't even gotten on the field. And then people are just shooting arrows and and people are just celebrating their dissension, right? So I was like, okay, we're not going to do this. People are going to offer, that's cool. The people who are going to talk to us and talk to you are going to be the people who are intently going to follow our non-negotiables. So after that, it was like, so a lot of people were like, holy cow, wait, he committed. Wait, when did he get the offer? Wait, was that his only offer? And I was like, who were the other offers? And to me, it's like, why do you need to talk about something else? It's the ex-girlfriend, right? Analogy. Like, I'm here. This is who I'm going to dance with. I'm not going to talk with anybody else I dance with. And this is in respect to them. And then in respect to the current school that I'm tied to. My circle, those kids, they believe the same thing too. Right? Like you got to have this patience and like trusting the process. When we talk about the process, everyone just says what the process is. We identify what the process is in our circle and what that is. And I'm always challenging the guys when they post stuff on social media. Is that helping you get to your goals? And they're like, thanks for the reminder, coach. Boom, deleted. Right? And then just kind of change this narrative of, so I'm changing the narrative within our Samoan community and what Polynesians look like based off of what the narrative is by everybody else outside of our community. And then I'm just trying to take that fight and then put it into the quarterback community. And then you can only take care of little by little, like what's in front of you. So for me, I can't take on the entire world about this, but I can handle it when I'm here speaking to you guys, right? Or I'm speaking to my quarterbacks in my circle. We're just going to do things different, right? We're going to talk about it and what's important, keeping what's important, how we're going to do it, how we're going to carry ourselves, and how that affects everybody. How does that affect everybody else? Just because everybody's doing it this way and it looks like the cool and fun way, because on social media, people are getting all these likes, millennials, back to millennials, right? They've got to learn to like communicate with people, talk with people, like build real relationships, right? So a lot of these people, everything's on social media. So I want them to walk up, right? Give somebody a firm handshake, look them in the eye, old school style, right? I bet you a lot of young guys would come up and shake your hand and look you in your eye and give you a firm grip. That surprises you, surprises a lot of people, because it's kind of a lost art. Little things like that, just being able to like just communicate and be in community and talk to people. So
awesome. That was an very enlightening and eye-opening interview. Thank you so much for all that backstory about your heritage and how your quarterback kind of coach came along and the backstory on Leo's commitment. Really good stuff. Thank you for the time.
Thank you for having me on. Thank you for allowing me to speak about my culture, right? And then just speak on San Diego State, because we're on the rise, baby. Aztecs.
Absolutely. Fans will love to hear that. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care.
All right, Paul. Father's Day episode, we had a chance to catch up with Drew Aumavae, who's the father of Aztec quarterback Leo Aumavae, who we had on the inaugural episode of the podcast. What were your thoughts about our discussion, our long but very insightful discussion with him?
I'm going to have to say that you are the first media member to completely nail Liu's name. So I thought that was good. I thought that was.
I did my practice. I practiced. I did my homework.
No, that was perfect. I think there was a little surprise on Drew's face.
Yeah.
That was some props to there first starting off there. I thought the interview was very insightful. I mean, every time that I've had an opportunity to talk to him, whether it's just going back and forth on social media or at the spring game, stopped and talked to him, and he's just very insightful. He knows the game of football. He understands things from a perspective, I think, that's pretty unique. And, we went into this interview that just with the timing of it, it worked out for Father's Day, but we had been talking about this for a while, and just, I felt like going into it that I was like, out of my element, that I don't know enough about the Samoan Polynesian football culture to be able to really have a conversation about it. And so I thought he was just really gracious in being our guide and being willing to like say, no, we should kind of steer the conversation this way. And I thought it was really good and very insightful. And I learned a whole bunch, which helped me because, after that, and for the next episode, talking with Savai Esalu, I felt like I was like up to speed and I was way better prepared because of what Andrew brought to this conversation.
Yeah, it was like an education for us. Mm-hmm. It was for me, for sure, learning about the Samoan culture, Polynesian culture. I loved how his goal is to try to buck that stereotype about them being, 300-pound linemen, but they're also intelligent. They could be quarterbacks. Talked about Tua, a Heisman Trophy winner, a national champion. The other part of it, I think it was in response to a question you asked about tension with assimilating into the U.S. He was talking about how there's a struggle with keeping your culture alive while in a new place. Well, it resonates with me because it's kind of what, my life was. I wasn't born in the U.S. I moved to the U.S. when I was 4 years old to Los Angeles. And the reason we moved to Los Angeles, my family and I, is because it's a huge Armenian population.
Right.
Glendale specifically. And it was, there's that struggle with trying to keep that Armenian culture in you and your family, but also trying to become American and filling those values and stuff. And in a way, it was easy being in Glendale to try to keep that culture because it was everywhere, right?
Right.
But it was also hard because you almost got too comfortable with being around so many and not necessarily putting yourself out there and going and trying to assimilate. And, I think as I got older, as I got into junior high and high school, I tried to do that as much as I could, but it really wasn't until I left home, so to speak, and came to San Diego on my own, going to college, is when I truly felt like I was kind of breaking that tension and fully immersing. So that resonated with me because it kind of reminded me of my backstory as well.
Well, let me ask you a question about that. I thought that at the very, very end, the whole response was great, but at the very, very end, he says, the funny thing is, and I'm paraphrasing, is that no one ever tells you that you can be both.
Yeah.
And that the characteristics of the culture that you're bringing to the community that you're in is of value, and you can help make the community better. And so I thought that was really eye-opening, because that is seemingly the two choices that society presents. You either assimilate and you leave the culture behind, or you don't assimilate and you stay in your native culture. And it seems like there isn't that marriage. And I really like that he brought that out, that there is so much strength. And we spent the rest of the conversation, I think, talking about the stereotypes. We talked about the strengths of the Samoan Polynesian communities, talked about how that's even a little bit unfair, being able to just group these people who have all of these rich histories that, they're not as they're similar, but like their ancestry and things like that are actually a lot more different than you would think. And I just thought that was really good. So I guess the question is for you is, what would you say to your experience and that final line of saying, like, you can be both?
Yeah, there's definitely a segment of Armenians in Los Angeles that have kind of this hard stance that, like, we're Armenians, we're not Americans, and we need to keep our culture alive. And if that takes, like, staying and only working with Armenians or only dating and marrying Armenians, that's what it needs to be.
Wow.
So there's definitely that segment of people, and I know a lot of them. So there's definitely that. I think I came from a family that was more, we're Armenian, and we need to keep our culture, and we need to do our rituals and keep our values and keep speaking Armenian and raising families that way, but also becoming Americans and utilizing the values and the opportunities we have in the U.S. So yeah, it's the tension is real for sure.
So going back into the conversation, I thought it was really insightful that he talked about Liu gaining 15 pounds. I thought it was interesting that he had never done any weight training, that he wasn't going to like err on the side, or he was going to err on the side of caution, and he wasn't going to, train him and outside of his expertise. And that, if there was any sort of knock on Liu as potentially being the backup, right? I mean, he's listed tied for second on the depth chart. It was that he was the smallest of the three. And so you just wouldn't expect him to be able to, be able to take too many hits, things of that nature. But if he's put on 15 pounds, that's going to put him in the same area as the other quarterbacks. And so, it just shows that he works, and that's not surprising. But I thought that those details, just kind of show you the competitor and the person that Liu is.
I could tell a little bit during the spring game that Liu did look a little bit more filled up. And that was just strictly from like our interview with him in January, and just seeing him through the Zoom screen versus in real life. So it was hard to tell for sure because of that. But yeah, I think definitely that's going to help him. The other part I think that I was fascinating was the three non-negotiables as a family for recruiting. And one being like having a requirement that a Polynesian is on the coaching staff. That was very interesting because there's probably not that many options, around the country.
Right.
But then I didn't know that there was that connection with Savai Eselu being good friends from, back in the day. and how that definitely helped with that recruitment and the commitment. So a lot of that stuff was I found fascinating, and just it was really cool to hear him kind of as a father talk about that recruitment process and how he wants, the coaching staff to love his son just like he loves him.
I agree. And, the article that I wrote that came out, this weekend, I was trying to explain that there is something that may have gone unnoticed by the fan base. And that is this recruiting turn towards Polynesians that they have discovered as they've looked to find to establish their culture, San Diego State's culture, that they found a lot of kindred spirits with the Polynesian culture. I think that was a very, very eye-opening part of this is, you start to look at who San Diego State is starting to really recruit against. And a lot of these players, man, they have BYU offers. I mean, that was Liu's first offer. And, you go and you do any kind of research, as, obviously we did for everything that we do with the Aumavaes. The first kind of the article that pops up is from a BYU site saying, look, we have a new offer out to Liu Aumavae. What do we know about him? And so I think that it's pretty substantial that San Diego State is starting to recruit against a school like BYU, which is known for having Polynesians come and play there. And so I think that's really important and really significant, that it's not just that, there's, Eslu on the staff and Justin Ina on the staff, but the entire culture at San Diego State embodies the community that the Aumavaes were looking for when they chose a school. And I think it's pretty significant. I mean, and I think it's really, really smart of San Diego State to, borrowing from that phrase of Coach Hall, what makes San Diego State special, what makes them different. And they have, leaned into we're not the glitz, we're not the glam. We have everything you need to excel and put you in the NFL, but we're about playing football and we're about working, and we're kind of not really about anything else. Would be the right phrase, instead of apologizing for that and saying, if we had some more finances, if we were in a bigger conference, we could. Instead of doing that, they've went the complete opposite, and they've said, this is what makes us special. And I tried to make the point in my article that in any culture where you see one characteristic, one value, whenever you see that take root, its complete opposite also grows. Just, I don't know what that dynamic is, but in our culture, marketing yourself, branding yourself, thinking about yourself in terms of how you look on social media, it's become the norm. And I think that out of rebellion from that, I think there's a lot of people who just kind of don't want to be that. And San Diego State has succeeded in finding a lot of these kind of players who just want to come in, work under the radar. And I think it's a great way to find success, because there's less competition for players like that. That sincerity that you need to be able to make that work doesn't go with what's fake about social media and all of that hype.
Yeah, I mean, we recorded, our interview with him was about 50 minutes. And when we stopped recording and we were saying our goodbyes, I think we ended up chatting for another 15 minutes with him.
Oh, wasn't that horrible that we didn't have that on?
Yeah.
That was such a good part. Junior Seau going on this. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And then I was like, damn, we should have recorded this, but just, more reason to have him back on. Definitely later, maybe when the seasons get going, and get his thoughts on how the offense is doing. Because, as we talked about during the interview, he's a quarterback trainer. Like, he's not just the father of the quarterback who also played football. He's a trainer, and he trains high school football quarterbacks. So he knows a lot more than your average, football father, I guess, in a way.
Right, and that was the third non-negotiable, right? Will he be able to develop Liu to the next level? And they found in Coach Kalinski an NFL style offense that gives tremendous freedom to the QB that is centered around the QB. He said, we weren't the average family that was like, oh, what facilities do you have? He said, we were asking questions that most people aren't going to be asking because of that experience. They chose San Diego State, and he's been a very, very outspoken fan of Jeff Kalinski, given some of the negative voices that are out there about him because the offense hasn't produced, to the high standards that he set. I think that's a refreshing thing, and it's also at least good to be able to know that that's out there as well.
That's going to do it for us for this special Father's Day episode. Hopefully all the fathers out there, including Paul yourself, have a great Father's Day.
Thank you.
The wives, the significant others, and the kids hopefully show all the dads out there some love and make them feel special today. And we appreciate all the listeners as always, and we'll talk to you guys next time. You are listening to the SDSU Football Podcast, presented by the East Village Times, with your hosts Andre Hagverdian and Paul Garrison.